once that number hits 5.
Welcome back to Beyond the Campfire. I'm one of your hosts, Stephen the Indian, alongside Will the Cowboy. We're a cowboy and Indian that talks about ghosts, monsters, cryptids, spooky things, anything that you can talk about over a campfire. So, if you like that kind of content, feel free to give us a follow. Follow us on all our socials. We're on X, Instagram, TikTok. So just search up Beyond the Campfire podcast. You should be able to find us. And yeah, without further ado, Mr. Will, the cowboy, what you got for us today?
Well, today we're booking our plane tickets because we're going back to a location we've been to already, because there's a little something we left unanswered over there. That is right. Today we'll be talking about one of England's greatest mysteries, and that will be the Princes in the Towers, or the Princes in the Towers. If you guys do not know what I'm referring to, Stephen, do you remember several episodes ago when we had talked about the haunting of the Tower of London? And here we go. Sorry, your mic is muted, by the way.
Oh, sorry, I lost you for a second.
Yeah. No, you're good. So do you remember the Tower of London?
Yes, I do. Man, that's a throwback.
I know, right? That's like going way back. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about one of England's greatest mysteries, which is about basically two boys who were found dead. And when I say found dead, they were not found until they were nothing but bones. And it's a mystery because we don't know what truly happened to the kids. We don't even know if the bones actually are the kids. And I'll get into that a little bit later. So the way I'm going to break this episode down is we're going to go through the history of the time period to guys kind of give you an idea who these princes were. And then we will kind of go into the history of their discovery and everything. And then I will cover the theories. Pretty simple, pretty easy kind of episode, especially our little hiatus we had. So to take you back, this is taking place in 1483. On April 9th of that year, King Edward IV, he got sick for 3 weeks and croaked. He died. Okay. At the time, he had a son. His name was Edward V. He was staying at Ludlow Castle in Shropshire, that's the traditional seat for the Princes of Wales. And the dead king's brother, Richard III, he was then the Duke of Gloucester, was at Middleham Castle in Yorkshire. Okay. So you've got this King Edward IV. He dies. Upon his death, his son, Edward V, was in Shropshire, and his brother, who was King Richard III, was at Middleham Castle in Yorkshire. These are two names we want to remember. These are the two characters for our story today. Okay. So Richard III, he got the news around April 15th. But there is some theories that he might have already known a little bit about Edward IV's sickness and kind of was like, okay, my brother's dead. Whatever. I knew it was going to happen. Shortly after that, it is said that he went to York Minster and publicly pledged his loyalty to the new king, which was, of course, Edward V, the son of Edward IV. So, have I lost you so far? Or are you kind of a little bit kind of keeping up?
Little bit lost.
Okay.
So maybe like reword it a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. So this guy dies. Okay. He's the king of England at the time, Edward IV. Gets sick and dies. His brother finds out, and so does his son. Reports say as soon as he died, and his brother found out, his brother immediately went and pledged loyalty to the new king, Edward V.
God. Okay. All right. Got some rivalry going on. Okay.
Yeah. So, according to the Croyland Chronicles, which was like their Fox News back in the day, they said that before Edward IV's death, he named his brother Richard III as Lord Protector. And if you don't know what a Lord Protector is, basically he would kind of kind of keep things under control and keep his little nephew, safe, until he was like a full grown man running everything. So sorry, I'm reading my notes real quick. So Edward IV or Edward V and his uncle Richard III then left for London and met at Stony Stratford on April 29th. Okay, so King's dead. Richard hears the news, pledges loyalty to his nephew, rides out with his nephew, and they arrive and they meet.
Oh, can't hear you. I think you muted yourself.
My mic was not muted. What are you talking about?
All right, you're talking about the Kings. So.
Yeah. So the next morning, however, apparently Richard III arrested Edward V's his retune, which is the body of persons that are in the service of nobles and everything, and that was including the boy's uncle Anthony Woodville and their half brother Sir Richard Grey. So Richard III becomes Lord Protector of the region and kind of starts, even though he swears fealty to his nephew, kind of starts going a little bit off the end. Okay. They were sent to Pontefract Castle in Yorkshire, where on June 25th, Woodville and Grey were beheaded. Okay. Richard III then assumed custody of Edward V himself, prompting his mother, Elizabeth Woodville, to take her other son, Prince Richard, and her daughters in a sanctuary at Westminster Abbey. Okay. So basically, Richard III is kind of being a dick. Okay. His brother dies. He might have known about it a little bit beforehand, becomes known as Lord Protector, starts killing off some nobles, and then kind of takes sole custody of his nephew, who's the king now, by the way. And in fear, the king's mother dips out with her other kids. Let's see. So then,
so a lot of just different crazy family things going on.
A lot of family drama. It does play a lot of key roles later on in the mystery, and we'll get to that in just a second. And then, of course, because now he has control, they arrived in London together. Shortly after that, they kind of kept planning Edward's official coronation, and the date kept getting pushed off. It was supposed to be May 4th, but then it got pushed to June 25th. And so they're kind of figuring out coronation stuff. On May 19th of 1483, Edward V, he was placed in the Tower of London, which it wasn't just like, when we talked about the Tower of London and the hauntings, I want to be clear here. Tower of London was not just some spooky, scary castle where people went in there and got their heads lopped off. This was also where monarchs and stuff would stay before they were coronated as kings and queens, kind of like to keep them safe before the coronation. On June 26th, his younger brother, Prince Richard, finally got away from his mother, after she escaped for sanctuary, wanted to go hang out with his homie, his brother. And, so the two brothers were hanging out. And by that point, Edward V's coronation to become king was indefinitely postponed by Richard III. So not only has Richard III known about his brother's death and kind of killed a bunch of people and taken his nephew hostage almost, now he's got his other nephew hostage, and he says, you guys remember how we're going to do the coronation in June? It's not happening. There will be no coronation. On Sunday, June 22nd, there was a sermon preached by Dr. Ralph Shaw. He was the brother of the Lord Mayor of London, and he claimed that Richard III to be the only legitimate heir to the House of York. So this priest is like, yo, bump that kid. That's the king, right? So on June 25th, a bunch of lords and knights and everybody got together to petition Richard III to take the throne. So it's getting heated. Okay, things are getting heated, right? Richard's killing people. Richard's getting people to swear fealty to him. He's taking power, and he's basically saying, "My nephew can bump off. I don't care about him." Like, now, both princes were subsequently declared illegitimate by Parliament So then on top of that, Parliament then said in 1484, there was an act of Parliament known as Titulus Regis. And that basically was like, yo, haha, screw Edward V, who's the rightful heir. We're going to put Richard III on the throne. So that act, the way it kind of nullified it was trying to say that Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville's marriage was invalid because apparently Edward had a pre-contract of marriage with another woman named Lady Eleanor Talbot. And so then July 6th, Richard III was declared king and crowned, and the boy. Sorry, I don't know why it keeps doing that.
I'm gonna say I see like flashing and unflashing. It's like, is your computer going on and off?
I don't know. I got a storm brewing. There's a storm coming in, but
oh boy. Oh, all right. Well, hopefully you can keep on cracking. So
I know. Any thoughts or comments?
Sort of. Yeah, I feel like I see there's this web of kings claiming legitimacy, other kings doing this thing and that thing. So I mean, what I'm getting is there's a web of things that are probably going to get tangled and cause a lot of commotion at some point.
Yes.
So okay.
So now we're going to kind of go a bit into the disappearance. There's an Italian friar. His name was Dominic Mancini. He came to England in the 1480s, and he was in London, happened to be in London during the spring and summer of 1483. And apparently, according to what he wrote, was that after Richard III seized the throne, Edward V and his younger brother, Richard, they were taken to the inner apartment of the Tower. And for some reason, after that, they were slowly started to see less and less and less of the princes. So, what I mean by that is, like I said, Richard III did some sneaky stuff and took power of England and basically threw his nephews aside, who were the legitimate heirs. And this friar had noticed that shortly after Richard was crowned king, he kind of started to see less and less of the princes around the grounds. They kind of just started slowly disappearing. Now Mancini does record that around this time, Edward V was being apparently visited by a doctor. And he apparently reported that Edward was like a victim prepared for sacrifice, sought remission of his sins by daily confession and penance because he believed the death was facing him. So Mancini is also saying that at this time there was a doctor who was visiting the young prince, and the prince was probably sick or something, but he kept asking to be atoned of his sins because he felt he was going to be killed.
I wonder why.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. I see how things are. Okay.
So there are reports that the two princes were seen playing in the Tower grounds shortly after Prince Richard joined his elder brother, but there are no records. There are no record sightings of them after the summer of 1483. So when the coronation was still being planned, as you know, his brother came to visit with him, Prince Richard, and everybody's like, "Oh, look, they're playing kickball out in the Tower grounds. They're having a great old time. They're being kids." But then once Richard was King Richard III, not his brother, King Richard III, his uncle was crowned king, there was no more seeing them playing anymore. So they kind of like disappeared.
Yeah.
From records, from sightings, they just disappeared. So there was apparently an attempt in July where some people were going to try to rescue them, and it failed. And after that, we really don't know much about what happened to the princes after that time period. Many historians believe, we'll kind of get into some of the theories later about what happened. But as for that, the princes were gone. After Richard was crowned, nobody saw him again. Any thoughts, comments, questions before I continue?
I'm just like, these disappearances could be murders. It could be just people stopped writing things down. It could just like, it could be any number of things. But it is weird. But it
Yeah.
also is like, seems like there's like a lot of rivalries and jealousies going about.
Right.
So
Well, because like you got to put yourself in the shoes of like this. Like so your dad, okay? Imagine your dad was king, okay?
right,
And then your dad just got sick, whatever, and he dies.
yeah,
And then they're like, all right, Steven, you're going to be King Steve, okay?
there we
And
go. Like it.
your uncle is going to be the Lord Protector. He's going to do all this stuff and help you, right?
Yeah,
But then he takes me, you know, and some of your other friends, and he executes us. Then you get into the tower, you're getting ready for your coronation, and then all of a sudden your brother Simon shows up, and he's like, yo, what's up, King Steve? Hanging out, playing baseball, you know, you're chilling. And then all of a sudden your uncle says, guess what? You're illegitimate.
yeah.
Your dad was banging some other woman before he married your mom. I'm king now. Like,
It's a yeah. It's just, man. There you go.
you thought your family drama was bad?
Look at
Try
the kings
England.
of England. So
Bunch of inbred murdering losers.
yeah.
So apparently, there are several sources suggesting that apparently shortly after the prince's disappearance, there were rumors that they had died. There was some rumors that appeared of the murder in France in January of 1484. So this is like probably about 6 months after. Guillemot de Rochefort, who is Lord Chancellor of France, kind of told the estate generals to take warning from the fate of the princes. And they're like, yo, England's kings are dead. We need to be careful because our very own king, let's see, 5, 6, 7, Charles the 8th is 13. We got to be careful because if these guys are dying, he might die.
Watch out.
I know, right? There were some other early reports from that of course, like I said, Guillemot de Rochefort, Philippe de Comines, who is a French politician, Caspar Weinreich, who is a contemporary German chronicler, and Jane Alleretz, who is a recorder of Rotterdam. And they also were saying that Richard killed the princes.
Which, I mean, kind of looks like he had the motive, but an opportunity, perhaps in some way. Oh, you got muted again.
I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's because this cord is bad. My cord could be going bad because
maybe the ghosts of English kings do not like this podcast episode we're doing today.
The King Richard III is coming. He's going to cut my head off.
Oh boy, here we go.
Actually, so De Comines Memoirs, circa 1500, they said that it might have been the Duke of Buckingham at the time who put the princes to death.
I see. Okay. All right, continue. Yeah. I'll just keep following along.
I swear this microphone's going to... So...
They're coming for us, man. The Kings of England. They don't
I know.
like doing this.
So what's really interesting is that, like, during this time period, so when the princes disappeared, nobody really knew what happened to them.
Yeah.
There was no evidence or anything. Everyone's just kind of pulling things out their ass, and they're just like, that Richard III guy, he definitely killed them. So we had some rumors flying, and there was no reliable, well-informed, independent, or impartial sources. But it didn't matter. The French were spreading rumors like wildfire saying they were murdered. Now, apparently before November 2023, there was only one contemporary narrative account of the boys' time in the tower. And that was of Dominic Mancini. That was the guy I told you about where he was like, I saw them playing in the tower. They were playing baseball, and like one of the boys might have been sick and was thinking he was going to die. That is the only account we have of what might have happened to the boys right after. And of course, that was not discovered until 1934. So this guy Muncini has like possibly the key, and then we don't know about it till 1934.
I gotcha.
Later accounts were written after the accession of Henry Tudor are usually biased or influenced by Tudor propaganda. So shortly after these princes and everything, after Richard III was taken down, you had the Tudor era, and the Tudor era was very much being very biased because they didn't really like Richard III.
Right.
So it's like, can you trust them? You know?
Yeah, it's you know.
And that's kind of really all we have. There was some people who wrote some stuff. Robert Fabian, he wrote in the Chronicles of London, which was 30 years after the princes disappeared. Again, don't know where they went, but he writes that Richard III was the murderer.
Well, yeah, that's something.
If you do know William Shakespeare, who we said is fake, apparently did write a play about Richard III, which also portrayed Richard III as murdering the princes in the tower.
I did watch the Richard III play when I was in London last year. So when you were saying like some of the stuff you were saying, I'm like, oh yeah, I like vaguely recall that this thing or that thing being part of it. So
yeah. So for a long time, we really had no clue. This took place in 1483. And on July 17th of 1674, almost 200 years after the supposed boy's death, there were some workmen who were remodeling the Tower of London. And guess what they found?
What did they find?
They found a wooden box containing 2 small human skeletons.
Oh, yikes. That is terrifying.
They were found buried 10 feet under the staircase, which led to the White Chapel, or the Chapel of the White Tower. They were, the remains were not the first children's skeletons found within the tower. So, you know, they're doing these remodels, and they're like, hey, we found these bodies, but it's like we found bodies before. You know, medieval Epstein over here. The bones of 2 children had previously been found in an old chamber that had been walled up. Polizologists could equally well have been those of the princes. The reason why the bones were attributed to the princes was because the location partially matched the account given by More. More was, let's see, where was More at? I'm trying to remember where More was at. Yeah, John Morton, or Thomas More, he was a Tudor loyalist who wrote the history of King Richard III. And so in his account, that's kind of where he kind of said the bodies might have been. More, of course, then further stated that they were later moved to a better place, which disagrees with where the bones were discovered. So in his history of King Richard III, he writes that Richard killed the boys, buried them under the staircase, and moved the bodies somewhere else later, but the bodies weren't moved. So it's like it kind of matches his account, but doesn't really match his account. But again, that was Tudor propaganda, so who knows? The staircase that the bones were found underneath had not yet been built at the time of Richard III. There's an anonymous report that they were found with pieces of rag and velvet about them. And the velvet, if the velvet part is true, that lines up with an aristocrat, because, like, you know, they had their, you know, like the royalty, you know, like the velvet and the silk sheets and, you know, the niceties.
So, okay. Well, all right, continue. Yeah.
4 years after the bones were discovered, they were placed in an urn, and upon the orders of King Charles II, they were put into Westminster Abbey and the wall of Henry, the wall of the Henry the Seventh Lady Chapel. And then Christopher Wren marked the resting place, and he wrote an inscription in Latin that states, "Here lies the remains of Edward V, King of England, and Richard, Duke of York, whose long desired and much sought after bones, after over 190 years, were found and turned deep beneath the rubble of the stairs that led up to the Chapel of the White Tower on the 17th of July in the year of our Lord, 1674. basically he just wrote on there, these are guys, these are their bones. This is where they were found, and we were looking for them, and they were gone for this many time, and we found them. Any comments?
None at this point in time. It's just yeah, continue. It's definitely just like, whoa, all right.
Yeah, drama. Now in 1933, they removed the bones from Westminster Abbey. And this guy named Lawrence Tanner, and a leading anatomist, William Wright, and the president of the Dental Association, George Northcroft, they measured the bones and teeth, and they concluded the bones did belong to children around the correct ages of the princes at the time. And my power went out for a second, and I lost internet. Where was I?
You were
chickens. Chickens.
Yep.
They found the bodies with chickens and other bones. There were also 3 very rusty nails. They did notice that one skeleton was larger than the other, but many of the bones were missing, including part of the smaller jawbone and all the teeth from the larger one. Now, apparently, many of the bones might have been actually broken by the original workmen. The examination has been criticized. That is conducted on the presumption that the bones were those of the princes and concentrated only to whether the bones showed evidence of suffocation. No attempt was even made to determine whether the bones were male or female. So they just kind of pulled the bones out, said, these are definitely the princes. Let's see what happened to them. And they noticed some bones were missing, some teeth were missing. Here's the sad thing. There's been no further scientific examination has been conducted on the bones. They're still in Westminster Abbey. They've done no DNA attempts. There's a petition started in 2013 requesting that the bones be DNA tested, but was closed months before its expected close date. If it had received 100,000 signatures, a parliamentary debate would have been triggered. And Polar points out that even if modern DNA and carbon dating proved the bones belonged to the princes, it would not prove who or what killed them. So they found the bones of the princes, what we think is the bones. That's why there's double mystery here. They found the bones and they think it was the princes, but we don't know exactly because nobody's doing any DNA. But even this one guy says, even if modern DNA finds out that these bones truly belong to the princes, it doesn't answer how or who killed them. So I'm going to get through the theories real quickly of who might have killed the princes.
Oh boy.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah. What happened?
You hear the thunder? I said we're gonna get into the theories, and then like lightning struck behind me. Oh. That was like perfect timing.
Perfect timing indeed. Yeah. No, that's incredible.
So we got 5 theories of what could have happened to the princes. I kind of found this on royalhistorygeek.com. This is where they, talk about the history. So there's some people that believe that the princes might not have actually died. But that theory is probably definitely not true. These boys probably did not make it out. The theories range from Richard stashing the princess somewhere else to a secret deal between Elizabeth Wydeville and her brother-in-law. Apparently, there's some people that are saying that secret identities and alternative careers as construction workers in Colchester. That Richard III took power and was nice and was like, "Yo, get out of here. Here's your McLovin ID. Go be free." But that's probably not possible. There is the belief, like I said, so there's the Duke of Buckingham. That was one known theory. This is the best alternative theory to Richard III to some people. The Duke of Buckingham was Richard's staunchest supporter until he suddenly decided to spearhead a rebellion. So there was a rebellion that happened shortly after all of this. There's a rebellion against Richard III in 1483, and it was initially aimed to rescue Edward V and his brother from the Tower before it was too late. That was when Henry Stafford, Duke of Buckingham, became involved. And so he attempted to overthrow Richard III, and historian Alison Weir proposes that on September 3rd, 1483, that's just a date they've decided, that, sorry, I'm
Your mic went out. Sorry about that.
kill this thing. All right, I'm gonna quickly get this thing over with. So that the Duke of Buckingham led a rebellion, and shortly after his rebellion, that he possibly might have accidentally had the children executed. So there's a possibility that Duke killed them, but nobody really believes that theory. There is another popular theory on social media, but it's not entertained by historians, which is that Margaret Beaufort had the princess killed in 1483, so that her son, could become king one day. Not the best theory. Oh, my bad. Okay, I got the Duke mixed up. So it was not the Duke who killed them through execution. It was actually Henry VII, who, after his victory at Bosworth and kind of took over, was having everybody kind of executed. He might have, had the boys murdered. There's a theory that the boys murdered.
It would seem.
Causes. But the biggest running theory that we're going to end this episode on is that Richard III had his nephews killed because he did not want them to try to take the throne from him. So, any thoughts, comments, questions?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's anything. I'm just thinking about all this. This power can corrupt, and corrupt absolutely, and just one of the most sacred things that God has given us is family. And when there becomes a race just to get power and control and authority, like it leads people to do some pretty awful things. So as far as like the spooky element of it and things like that, I mean, yeah, when you got like some really bad blood stuff like that going on between family, who knows, right? Who knows what spiritual consequences will come about as a result of that. If you guys remember my our Tower of London episode last year, kind of what me and Will had talked about was just like
there's a lot of death.
A bunch of stuff had happened over there, but like, I mean, family rivalry between the English kings. I mean,
church rivalry, family rivalry. I mean, everyone in England want a piece of the pie.
Exactly.
So I think out of all these theories, Richard III is the most likely culprit if the princes were murdered. I think what needs to happen though is we need to somehow figure out how we can get those bones DNA tested,
right?
And at least to give that kind of closure. But I think everyone's right. I don't think we'll really know. I don't think we'll really know who killed them or why they were killed or what went down. I mean, but we might have at least some closure. We did some DNA on those bones. But I think you're right. Power corrupts people and it gives people a sense of immortality to where I can do whatever I want because I'm powerful and there's no consequences. So I think there's a chance that Richard killed his nephews. So thank you guys again for watching. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. And did King Richard III truly get away with one of the greatest murders in history?